going to show you everything you need to get started for under 200 bucks. So the first thing I got was the airbrushing kit from Harbor Freight, the Avanti kit. It's not that bad actually. This is the brush that comes with it. I did eventually upgrade to a Iwata Neo, still a really cheap brush in the airbrushing world. But this one actually got the job done for a lot of things. I mean, every bait that's down here already was painted with the Harbor Freight brush. So no fancy brush, no nothing special, just the $100 kit that came from Harbor Freight. So when you're creating your patterns and designs, this was all done with stencils. And stencils, I actually haven't paid a single dime for stencils. I use old business cards. This could be out of paper plates, index cards, anything. You just draw out your design and then cut it out with an X-Acto knife. And for example, like these three is what made this bait. So those three stripes is what gave this bait its effect. So making stencils is a very easy way to make sure you have unique baits. So like you have your shad line. This one's a little too thick. I have another one cut a little bit smaller. Got a shad dot. It's just a little diamond. You can be real creative with these stencils and get as wild as you want. Here's a crawl pattern I did. Alright, and to hold my bait while I paint it, I'm going to be using an old fly tying vise. This is not something necessary. You can use $10 helping hands from Hobby Lobby. That'll work perfectly fine. Or if you've seen Milliken Fishing's videos, he just holds it with his hand. So that's completely optional. Now we're going to be painting a really easy bait. We're going to do a popper. And we're going to do this one in only 2 colors. So this is going to be one of the cheapest baits you could paint. This would only be 2 colors. This came out of a $25 Amazon kit. Came with 30 baits. Comes with eyes and split rings. So right now we're looking at $125. This is not necessary, but this is about $50 to $70 on Amazon if you get a cheap one for a rotary vise. This is actually meant for tying flies. It's not really meant for painting, but it does work really well. The paints we're going to be using is the createx, however you say it, that you can get at Hobby Lobby. This is the pearlized green and opaque black. So these are the only 2 colors we're going to be using on this bait. These colors cost $4.99 at Hobby Lobby, so that's 10 bucks. Now when I'm spraying with the airbrush, you'll hear my compressor turn on. I'm sorry about that. So this is going to be a really quick bait to paint, especially because it's only 2 colors. I am going to thin this out a little bit. You could thin this out with water or actually buy some thinner, which is $4.99 as well. Alright, so I thinned my paint out a little bit. I'm going to do a little test run. I'm going to do a little test run down here on my cardboard before I do it on the bait. Alright. I'm just putting a thin layer, and you can always add more, but you can't take it away. So start off with a thin layer. And this is why I like the rotary vices, because I can spin the bait, especially if we're just trying to do an even coat of the same color. It makes it really efficient. Need to add a little more paint. kind of darken this up a little bit. Alright, now we got this a nice pearlized chartreuse green color. I'm going to clean out my airbrush with some water, and to do that I'm going to be using this little water container. You can get these at any dollar store. This one just happened to come with some spatulas and stuff we got for the grill. So before we move on to the next color, and once you clean out your airbrush, we're gonna let this dry for a second. You could blast this with a hair dryer, speed this process up, or even spray it with some air from your airbrush. But don't get too close, because if there is wet paint, you will cause it to splatter. So to make our pattern, we're going to be using this netting. So this netting actually came from a kid's toy. It held 3 balls in it. Came from the dollar store. But you can use anything. This could be, you know, from a pack of onions at the grocery store. There's all kinds of stuff that comes with this netting. So I'm going to take this netting, and it's really thin by itself. So we're going to fold it over on top of itself twice. So it'll be like we're spraying through 4 layers of netting to create the scaling pattern I want on this bait. Alright, so I have 2 layers. I'm going to fold them in half again. Now that's what we're going to be spraying through. So get you some clothespins or some metal clips, binder clips, whatever you got to use to hold down the netting. Alright, now I don't want these to be lined up, so I'm trying to make sure that they're all uneven. I don't want any even patterns on here. No big gaps. I want them to be filled in with the netting. Alright. Let's go ahead and take a few drops of our opaque black. Now with this particular paint, I'm not going to thin this one, and only with the opaque colors do I not thin them. They tend to spray pretty well out of this brush without being thinned, but that varies from paint to paint. You'll have to test them and find out which ones work for you. Alright, so we added a couple drops in there. Now this is going to be pretty quick. We're not going to blast this and stay on it. Test it real quick. Alright, we're going to let that dry for a second. Bam, look at that pattern. Look at that bait. That came out pretty nice. So that's going to pop even more once we put the gloss on it, the clear coat. And for that, if we're trying to go the cheapest route, for $7 at Hobby Lobby, you can get this UV resin that's made for jewelry, but make sure you get the hard resin because the soft resin will not work for this. Alright, so let's put some eyes on this bad boy. I just realized I did not paint the mouth of this bait, so we're going to paint it black real quick. Alright, now the mouth's colored. Yeah, check that bait out. Look at how good that works. Alright, now we need to add some eyes to the bait. I just happen to have some red eyes right here, so that's probably what I'm going to put on it. Now, these little eyes you can get for dirt cheap on Amazon for hundreds and hundreds. I have a lot left over from fly tying. I wish I had some of these frog eyes a little bit smaller. They would be really good for this bait. To secure the eyes, I'm just going to use some Gorilla Glue. The tiniest dot. One little baby dot. And some dry piece of super glue came off with it. Alright, got that eye secure. Do the same thing on the other side. Little baby dot. Take our eye. Alright, now we got the eye secured. Let that dry for a second. Only thing left to do is clear coat this with the UV resin. Now UV lights you can get on Amazon for about 25 bucks. You can get bigger ones for about 30 bucks that plug into the wall. We're just going to be using this handheld one. Vansky. Came from Amazon. I don't remember how much it cost. But you don't have to use UV resin. Another option is KBS diamond. That's what's in that jar over there. Alright, let's go ahead and brush on our first layer of the UV resin. If you're brushing it on, I recommend you do 2 layers. If you're dipping it with something like Light, I recommend you just do 1 layer. Start from the back and work my way down. You can already see it's really making those colors pop from underneath that black. Alright, once we got that clear coat on there, we can go ahead and hit it with the UV light. Now to fully cure this, I recommend you leave it in the sun for a few hours or put it under a bigger UV light and leave it there for a little bit, about at least 20 minutes. These little handheld lights could get it safe to touch in just a couple minutes, so it'll be safe to work with just a couple minutes, no problem at all. But to make sure it's fully cured, I would leave it in the sun for a couple hours or put it under a bigger UV light. Now be careful with this UV resin. If you have the window open or any sunlight gets in, you will cure your resin before you want to. And it doesn't do well if it gets cold either, so if it's very cold, it gets to like a gooey mess, so just be careful with it. Some LED lights will cure it as well, so depending on what kind of light you're using, that may be an issue as well. And to put the decal on this bait, we're going to be using waterslide stencils. So I got this idea from Baker Baits. So if y'all don't watch him, y'all should. Or Baker Builds, I could have that wrong. We're going to YouTube that real quick. Pull it up. This guy right here. So I follow him and he kind of got me inspired to get the airbrush. I already started making my own baits, soft plastics and stuff. Been watching a lot of marling baits over the years, but seeing him create some really unique designs is what pushed me over the edge to get the airbrush. So with this water slide paper, what you do is you use your normal printer, print out whatever you want on it, and then spray it with a spray paint gloss. Once you do that, you let it dry, do a couple of layers, and then you cut these out with an X-Acto knife. Use water to transfer it from here to here. That's where it gets its name, and it's a really unique way to transfer decals. And I'm so thankful that I've seen his video on this, because not only can you use this for baits, you can make coffee cups, unique things for your family, but what I'm most excited about is for custom building rods and being able to put your own unique pictures or decals on the rods. And this transfer paper cost about $12 online, so it's not that expensive. $12 for 20 sheets. We got our YouTube play button. So I got my little pop-up water dish. This is actually for pets, but it works well. I have just a little bit of water from my squirt bottle. I'm gonna do big bold letters so it's easy to read. So I'm going to put the extraordinary on upside down just because of the way my vise is turned, and then I'm going to put the play button right in front of the hook hanger. So what I'm going to do with this is just dip it straight into the water, and we're just going to dunk it. We don't want to ease it in because it'll curl up on us. Just put the whole thing underwater and kind of hold it down with your fingers. And then once you're done waterboarding it for a few seconds, you can let go. It should stay down there and not curl up. Now we're just going to let it sit in there of a small piece like this, just let it sit for about 10 to 30 seconds and it should come off pretty easy. Now since this is such a big label, I should be able to do it by hand, just pick it up. Place it where I would like on the bait. Hold it down and then slide the back out. And while it's still wet, you can adjust it where you like. Alright, I know it's going to be upside down on the camera, but you'll see it later when it's correct. Now let's go ahead and do the same thing to put the YouTube button on the front. Make sure all the excess water's off. Any air bubbles are out. And we gotta be careful not to bump this one because it's still not completely dry. Take our play button, give him the same treatment as the other one. Alright, just a few seconds in the dunk tank for him. And slide it off. Alright, then we're going to let these dry. Alright, so I flip the bait around so you can get a better view of what we just did. Look at that. We got the play button with the logo on there. How cool is that? Now remember to go check out Baker Builds and watch his videos, because this is where I got that from. There we go. Now check that out. See the play button and we got the logo. Be sure to check out Baker Builds. That's where I learned this from. He's the one who really inspired me to get started on the airbrush. I'm just showing y'all how to do it cheap. Alright, now let's put our second coat on there and this will be done. I'm starting from the bottom this time. Put it on the label first. Be real careful not to scratch it or damage it, move it, anything like that. And work our way down. Alright, once you have a nice even layer of UV resin all over it, we're going to blast it with the light again. So, not bad for just two colors.